Germany's borders in 1937, shortly before the Second World War. Separated from the rest of Germany by the Polish corridor after the defeat in the First World War, the province of East Prussia. An old German province whose eastern border, respected by Lithuania, Poland and Russia, had remained unchanged for 500 years. This corner between the three countries of Lithuania, Poland and Germany was the home of the world-famous Trakehner horses.
Trakehnern lives on. East Prussia's warm-blood horses conquer the world.
Da ist er.
Unveiling the celebrated Olympic and World Cup champion Abdullah, in whose veins flows the blood of his East Prussian Trakehner ancestors. He left Germany in utero and was foaled in Canada.
Abdullah, 14 years old, out of Ibiza by Maharaja.
An unforgettable moment for Sue and Terry Williams, the owners, for Konrad Homfeld, the rider, and for Klaus Philipp, who specializes in painting horses.
Mr. Homfeld, I'm honored to award you the golden pin of the Trakehner Förderverein.
For Dietrich von Lenski-Kattenau, president of the Trakehner Förderverein, it was a great pleasure to honor the rider whose name is inseparably linked with Abdullah's success.
Aus den USA Nummer 2, from the United States number 2, des États-Unis numéro 2, Abdullah mit Konrad Homfeld.
It was Konrad Homfeld, champion rider from the United States, who took this highly talented animal to team gold and individual silver medals in the Los Angeles Olympic Games with his sensitive style of riding and his strong nerves. Here too, at the Hamburg Derby, Homfeld and Abdullah are not only among the favourites, they're also the declared darlings of the knowledgeable public. On this very difficult course too, the grey Trakehner stallion and his American rider are considered among the best in the world. One reporter wrote, "The two deserve their own chapter in a textbook on aesthetic riding."
In third place with 4 faults, 158.69 seconds, number 2, Konrad Homfeld, USA, riding Abdullah.
But let's leave Abdullah and go back to the origins of the Trakehner, from the present to the past, from Hamburg to East Prussia, a distance of 1,000 kilometers, and yet so far out of reach because the Soviet-occupied northern sector of East Prussia is a military area inaccessible to all. Let's go back to the time when the moose was displayed on the East Prussian coat of arms, and the moose antlers became the brand of the Trakehner horse. Historic photos from the easternmost province of Germany, in which 2.5 million Germans made their living, primarily from agriculture and animal breeding. East Prussia, Germany's breadbasket. East Prussia, the land of dark forests and 1,000 lakes. Borderland East Prussia in the short respite between 2 world wars. Some old film footage from the 30s found buried in an archive.
The most noble product of the East Prussian soil evolved from a small wild horse. It took 200 years and skillful breeding to develop these beautiful animals. The Trakehner was produced by adding Arabian as well as English thoroughbred blood. Its beauty and nobility came from the Arabian. The English thoroughbred gave it strength and endurance. A horse was created that combines beauty and faithfulness, hardiness and the capability to perform, and the best of character, docility and a good temperament. They're the result of the first tenet of all Trakehner breeders. Give them the most loving treatment and the most tender care.
As a result of the success of the Trakehner warm-blood horses all over the world, it went almost unnoticed that the horse country of East Prussia also had the largest number of cold-bloods of all the German provinces. Robust, cold-blooded horses were bred wherever the heavy soil needed strong workers, for example in Ermland and in central East Prussia.
The world-famous Trakehnern main stud. It was established in 1732 by order of the first king of Prussia. Crossing Arabian and English blood with native German horses led to the utility and jumping horse, which has become an established breed. Its brand, the single or double moose antler, is known to riders all over the world. A chief breeding stallion lives like a king. In the summer in his own paddock, next to his small, lovely horse villa with its large pastures on which he can run as much as he likes. No strange sound disturbs the quiet of this horse paradise.
By an extraordinary stroke of good fortune, we came across some footage, long believed lost, which gives us an unexpected second look at famous stallions, chief breeding stallions, from those years between the two wars. A feast for the eyes to see them in full action, the unforgotten progenitors. But let's return to our old film and its commentary from the golden age of Trakehnen.
The first steps in a new world. This baby horse is just 15 hours old. On the second day, things were a little easier. The old school wagon used to bring the parents of these Trakehnen children to school. These outlying farms are the homes of individual herds, which are assembled according to age or colour. Here at Bayergallen, a mixed herd, bays, greys and blacks, a colourful group. The most wonderful times for a foal are when it first ventures out onto the pasture in spring. Somewhat sleepy, playful, always engulfed in the love of its dam.
Also, meine Herrschaften, das sind meine Jüngsten, 6 bis 8 Wochen alt.
But life with mother lasts only 6 months. Then the foals are weaned and form their own herd. the weanling herd. After another 6 months, colts and fillies are separated.
Das hier sind alles einjährige Hengste. Der da ist ein besonders schönes Trakehner Pferd.
The broad dialect of the stud farm worker is as much a part of these irreplaceable documents of East Prussian lifestyle as the pictures of his playful protégés on the large pastures of the Trakehnen farm, which covered a very generous 15,000 acres.
Here we have the first attempts at jumping. No loud words, no beating. The whip is only used as encouragement. Obedience training is the primary axiom.
Putting on the saddle and the first attempts under a rider were not considered a training problem in Trakehnen. It was important to get the horses used to the rider as quickly as possible. The large operation, with its 1,100 employees, ranking from the stud director down to the apprentice groom, was administered in a business-like fashion. Time was money. Horses had to be broken quickly. A rodeo, though this time not in Texas. The horse, as an animal that resorts to flight, has always thrived in a herd under the leadership of a head animal. Utilizing these instincts and habits on the first ride cross-country was not invented by the officials of the Trakehnen stud. First, a few careful jumps on a long rein. Then taking some ditches under the rider, a trained horse leading the way, and the still fearful herd follows hesitantly. It was easy in Trakehnen and wherever one knew how to handle horses.
Stallions in harness, a section of the 65 students with a sulky. It's only the third time that the horses have been in harness. Nevertheless, not a single horse breaks into a canter. On long cross-country rides, the stallions are prepared for their final test at the end of the year-long training period.
Four times a week there was a hunt. The mounts were those 3-year-old colts and fillies which, in the eyes of the stud director, were not suitable for breeding and had been transferred to the hunting stable. From this second team, so to speak, many a capable performance horse was developed on the Trakehnen countryside. Famous Trakehners such as Gimpel, Fasan, Absinthe, top horses and Olympic champions in combined training and dressage were never used for breeding. A performance test for horse and rider out on a merry hunt. In the autumn of every year, the most difficult German steeplechase, the Von der Goltz steeplechase, was run over this terrain. This canal was built by hard manual labour more than 250 years ago by the soldiers of the first Prussian king to drain the marshy terrain around Trakehnen. The hunt is over. The hounds receive their well-deserved rewards. On the way home, the men sing the song of the East Prussian rider, its lyrics reflecting the political situation of the borderland East Prussia.
Eure Söhne, Land im Osten, auf der Grenzmark letzten Posten stehen die Hand am Sattelknauf. Dass ein jeder Reiter werde, wuchsen deine Edelpferde aus dem Heimatboden auf. Dass ein jeder Reiter werde, wuchsen deine Edelpferde aus dem Heimatboden auf.
It was the task of the centrally located Trakehnen stud to furnish valuable breeding stallions to the various regional stud farms, from where they were sent to stallion stations in even the most remote villages. In this way, Trakehnen set the breeding goal and direction for the entire horse breeding industry in East Prussia. Braunsberg was one of these regional stud farms. Warm and cold blood stallions were kept here. One of the most important foal markets was held in the town of Gumbinnen, not far from Trakehnen. The sellers were usually farmers who couldn't afford to keep the foals. In those days, it was estimated that a foal cost 1 mark a day to feed. Foals sold for between 400 and 600 marks, quite a good price 50 years ago. The buyers at these foal markets were the larger breeding farms. A considerable amount of money changed hands. In the last year of the Second World War, 23,000 mares were registered in the East Prussian stud book and 850 stallions. A painful moment, also in the life of a horse. The foal is separated from its dam.
The Trakehner is just as suitable as a carriage horse and can be used with equal success in sporting events or for work.
We should add to that commentary from the 30s that the breeding goal after the First World War was directed toward the production of strong, large-framed horses. In contrast to today, even the most noble Trakehners had to be able to perform heavy farm work. The somewhat lighter sport horse of today found very little use 50 years ago. The horses foaled at the Trakehnen main stud were branded with the single moose antler on the right hind quarter. The noble warmblood horses produced by private breeders received the brand of the double moose antler on the left hind quarter. Talented in many ways and tough, fast, enduring and frugal. These attributes made the East Prussian warmblood the most popular cavalry mount. The reason for establishing Trakehnen had been a financial one. The king's coffers were to be spared by making the Prussian cavalry independent of foreign military horse imports. This was accomplished over several decades. Although in the 20th century the mounted military lost its significance with the advent of modern weapons, at the beginning of the Second World War, the German army still had 18 cavalry regiments and a total of about 22,000 horses. The Army Remount Commission purchased their 3-year-old remounts primarily in the East Prussian horse country at an average purchase price of 1,200 marks. The heavier horses went to the horse-drawn artillery. These film clips show the heavy work these army horses had to perform. Each breed has its show window. The most important exhibition took place during the Eastern Fair 1938 in Königsberg. That year, the East Prussian Stud Book Society, an association of warm-blood breeders established in 1888, celebrated its 50th anniversary. Always present were the representatives of the individual regional studs. They furnished the sires for quality sport horses.
Oscar Stensberg, the 82-year-old master of horsemanship, riding master of the cavalry school, on his school horse Gimpel, dressage champion at the Olympics in Amsterdam and Berlin.
Amsterdam, 1928, Berlin, 1936. The Trakehner Gimpel twice contributed to the gold medal win of the German dressage team. The Berlin Olympics. Major Gerhardt on the Trakehner Absinth, individual silver medalist in the dressage. 3-day cross-country in Berlin-Döberitz, part of the film coverage of the 1936 Olympics.
The second German, Captain Stubendorf. Lieutenant Krause, Denmark. Lieutenant Capello, Italy. Cavalry Captain Lippert, Germany. Captain Stubendorf, Germany. First Lieutenant Baron von Wangenheim, Germany. Wangenheim broke his collarbone but continued to ride and thus ensured the team gold for Germany. The outstanding individual champion was Captain Stubendorf, Germany. In front of Captain Thompson, USA, and Captain Lieutenant Lunding, Denmark.
It took a bare 9 years from the adulation of Captain Stubendorf and his Trakehner Normie to the total collapse of the Reich. In February 1945, a few weeks before the end of the war, the German newsreel reported on the hopeless battle for East Prussia.
Pictures of the Marienburg being defended heroically against the numerically superior Bolshevik regiments which are storming it. Having withstood many heavy onslaughts from the east, this fortress of the Knights of the Order, built in the 14th century, today finds itself in the hour of its greatest threat. The advancing Bolsheviks have forced hundreds of thousands of Germans to abandon all their possessions and to save only themselves and the bare necessities. In never-ending treks from morning to night, thousands of wagons and teams move across the ice into the protection of the Reich.
What Hitler's propagandists didn't reveal was that hundreds of thousands never reached the protection of the Reich, but miserably lost their lives on the way, and with them, their most faithful companions, East Prussia's horses. Many who reached the safety of the West owe their lives to the trek horses, which laboured in ice and snow in non-stop marches lasting for days and nights. The flight from East Prussia, over 1,000 kilometres and more, was the hardest performance test ever. One of the few East Prussians who was able to save some of his breeding stock was the farmer Franz Scharfvetter, his son Hans-Joachim.
This is the trek wagon in which my father left our farm in East Prussia in January 1945. He had 5 more teams. He started out with 27 horses. On the way, he lost several. My father arrived here with 16 mares, all descended from the famous Ita.
And this is what she looked like, the mare Ita, presented at the Eastern Fair in Königsberg in 1938.
The wagon was pulled by Ithaca and Italia, who came with us to the west, and we continued breeding here. These are some examples of this line here on our farm in Brunndorf.
On the luscious pastures of the Scharfvetter farm near Bremen, the descendants of Ita found ideal conditions. We should add that of about 100,000 horses in East Prussia in 1945, only a few thousand reached the area of the present Federal Republic, about 500 of them breeding stock bearing the Trakehner brand. Scattered to the 4 winds, only a few breeders were able to build a new life for themselves. One of them was the East Prussian Peter Elksnat, on a deserted farm not far from the East Frisian shore of the North Sea. He was the first private stallion owner after the war. starting again demanded diligence, alertness, toughness, luck, and a portion of the expertise that East Prussian farmers' sons had learned in their youth.
Hier sehen Sie die Stute Schwindlerin.
This is the mare Schwindlerin with her 19th foal. With this mare, I covered the 2,000 kilometers from Insterburg to here. And here you see her granddaughter Sommernacht. In this pedigree, we already have 128 ancestors in the last generation. At present, we have 2 more generations in our barn, so that the number of ancestors is now more than 500, all of them homebred. Looking at the generations of Trakehners and of the Elksnaat family, we have here my grandson Karsten, who I hope will continue breeding horses like his father and will then be able to add a few more generations of Trakehners.
Trakehnental in the hilly East Holstein region, a countryside which is reminiscent of Masuri in East Prussia. Here, Erdmutter von Sitzewitz set up her Trakehner farm. The ancestral home of the von Sitzewitz family in Wedern was one of the leading warm-blood breeding establishments in Germany. Photos show us the splendor of this estate. A splendor which, more than 40 years ago, was extinguished suddenly with the arrival of the Soviet armies. Erdmutter, 12 years old at the time, guided a trek wagon pulled by breeding stock from the highly prized V family. Here, an example of the Sitzewitz stock from the more peaceful days before the war. Originally in East Prussia, today in Holstein, with 50 years in between.
This is Vorliebe by Polawind with a filly by Königsruf, foaled on April the 5th.
An expert opinion from Werner Paul, whose father bred the Olympic horse Normi in East Prussia.
A foal that typifies the classical Trakehner. All parts of its body in excellent harmony. And what makes this foal particularly noticeable is its movement. This is truly an exemplary mover, a trot befitting a riding horse breed.
Playful and full of life, a true offspring of the old V line perpetuated by the Trek mare Velegu. Not everyone who reached the West in the spring of 1945 could consider themselves to be in safety. The rigors of the journey and the lack of feed took many more lives among the breeding stock. Only the strongest survived. A gruesome selection, perhaps, but one that contributed to the high performance status of today's Trakehner breed. The number brand is to be applied to prevent the exchange of sport horses in the future, and of course the Trakehner brand is the high point of the presentation. The foal papers giving the date of breeding and foaling, the horse's markings and its pedigree can now be issued. A life devoted to Trakehner horses. When it comes to Trakehners, Frau von Sitzewitz knows what she's talking about. What's the situation today?
At the moment, we're doing well because of the great success of Abdullah. But even without him, our horses were always popular as riding horses, both before the war and also now, after the war. Our horses would have had it even easier if today's young riders hadn't been born into a generation which has been brought up without discipline. And that, unfortunately, is sometimes only too obvious. There's too much beating, they ride too rough, because they think they can vent their aggressions on the poor horses. If we could get rid of that, then our horses would be much, much better off.
All on her own, Erdmutter von Sitzewitz has saved and developed a Trakehner bloodline that is strong in performance.
Come on, little filly. Yes, we want you in the picture. Ears forward a little. Look here, see what's going on. There, that's a good girl. Come here, my little one.
A feast for a horse's ears. The kind words of encouragement from its master. A life dedicated to the Trakehner is how we could describe the life of the East Prussian farmer and cavalry captain Dietrich von Lenski-Kattenau, a man who, since the war, has served in numerous honorary positions to maintain and further the Trakehner breed. As the president of the Trakehner Förderverein, he's constantly involved in fundraising. It's one way in which the Trakehner breed can continue to exist, a breed which has lost its home and receives no financial support from the federal government or the states, as the other German breeds do. He too was able to save valuable breeding stock from his family farm at Kattenau, which bordered the Trakehnen main stud. And he continues breeding with them on a modest scale at his present home in Ritterhude near Bremen.
I come from Kattenau, near Stallupönen, East Prussia, and was fortunate to have saved a few mares from an old Kattenau family that my grandfather had bred.
An denen schon mein Großvater gezüchtet hat. Und hier vor Ihnen steht eine...
Here we have a 3-year-old filly from the Elfer line, which has produced 15 foals here in the Federal Republic. 11 of them became brood mares in the Trakehner breed, and there's never a show today that doesn't include some blood from this old line.
Wo nicht Blut aus dieser alten Stamm vorhanden ist.
The last living daughter of the Trakehner Elfer is a pensioner today, well looked after by a young breeder in the vicinity of Kaiserslautern.
This is Elfenglück, the last daughter of Elfer. Elfenglück is the dam of 2 approved stallions, Elfenglanz and Elfenspuck. Today she's 23 years old and is in foal again by Postmeister. She's living proof of the longevity and fertility of the Trakehner.
Altchen, komm, geh, husch.
The magnificent stallion Postmeister. His ancestors, too, used to live in Kattenau, which is now part of the hermetically sealed Soviet-occupied northern part of East Prussia. Trakehnen, a facet of German history. In 1973, the bronze copy of the Tempelhüter statue found a home in front of the German Horse Museum at Verden. The original was taken as war booty to Moscow. The life-size statue, created by the sculptor Reinhold Kubert, was unveiled in front of the home of the stud director on the occasion of the 200th anniversary of Trakehnen. Tempelhüter, son of perfectionist, chief breeding stallion, and founder of valuable bloodlines, became the symbol of the breed and the art of breeding. But let's go back to the beginning again. The Prussian king Friedrich Wilhelm I founded the Trakehnen royal stud in 1732. He needed carriage horses for himself and riding horses for his soldiers. Large marshy areas near the Lithuanian border had to be drained. The nearby town of Gumbinnen later became the seat of the government. This mansion was the residence of the stud directors. Under Frederick the Great, Johann Friedrich von Domhardt held this difficult post for 42 years. When the king learned that mail dispatched from Berlin took 24 hours less to reach Königsberg if the couriers rode Trakehner horses, he decreed that henceforth only Trakehners were to be used. The inventory of the stud at that time was 1,100 horses, including 500 brood mares. Stud director von Borgsdorf, a convinced farmer, furthered the breeding of horses by farmers. Burchard von Oettingen created around 1900 the modern Trakehnen with its generous buildings and well-kept parks. In 1914, the Russians invaded Trakehnen. Although the horses had been evacuated in good time, the buildings were destroyed. Stud director Count Spornik played a major role in the development of the stud after the war by increased infusion of thoroughbred blood with a view towards producing riding horses. His successor, Count Lehndorff, changed the breed to a strong utility horse capable of many uses. Dr. Ernst Ehlert was the last stud director before the expulsion in 1944. By that time, this 15,000-acre horse paradise had 700 buildings, 1,100 employees, and about the same number of horses, including 20 chief breeding stallions and 378 broodmares. Siegfried von Schrötter-Wohnsdorf, together with Dr. Fritz Schilke, identified and collected the refugee horses which had been scattered in all directions. In 1947, they founded the Trakehner Verband. The well-known expert Hans-Joachim Köller from the German Horse Museum in Verden talking about the opinions and prejudices concerning Trakehner horses.
Until 1945, the Trakehner was the undisputed world champion. It reigned supreme in shows and at the Olympic Games. After the expulsion, it was considered somewhat of an intruder in Western breeding areas. It was treated accordingly in the press. But it continues to be a most capable, intelligent and sensitive horse for riders who can communicate with it.
Of 26,000 mares and 850 stallions registered in the stud book for warmbloods of Trakehner origin and used for breeding in 1944, only 700 mares and 60 stallions were left. In those difficult years after the war, it wasn't only East Prussian breeders who cared for the survival of the horses with the moose antler brand. In this well-tended paddock at the Vogelsanghof estate on the Lower Rhine, the Trakehner stallion Mackensen gets his exercise. His owner, Gottfried Hogen, was one of the first non-East Prussians who after the war changed from breeding cold bloods to the noble East Prussian warmbloods. Gottfried Hogen, today the president of the Trakehner Verband, never regretted changing over. He's now one of the largest private stallion owners in the Federal Republic.
During the war, I was in Trakehnern and East Prussia, and it was a matter of course for me, when I returned home after the war, to begin breeding East Prussian horses here. I was fortunate to be able to buy a mare bred by the Zitzewitz-Wedern stud, which was pulling a milk wagon. Unfortunately, I didn't have much luck with that mare. She died from phosphorus poisoning, but not before she produced a very good foal here, which Dr. Schilke branded in 1947, even before the Trakehner Verband came into existence.
Soon after, a Trek mare foaled the stallion Maharaja, grandsire of the world-famous grey stallion Abdullah. Like the stud directors in Trakehnen, the breeder from the Lower Rhine endeavoured to infuse fresh blood into the Trakehner breed, for example, through this French thoroughbred stallion. The days of the work and military horses are over. What's in demand now is the light, elegant sport and recreational horse, which is willing to go and jump. The breeders of the German regional brands all had to adjust their programmes and have used Trakehner blood for this purpose. It's the irresistible scent of the mares grazing close by which drives the stallion to charge at the fence. One place where the Trakehner horse found a new home was the Panker stud of the Kurhessische Hausstiftung in East Holstein. The estate initially served as a boarding farm in which refugee horses found a home. In time, this developed into one of the best-known breeding farms. The succulent pastures of Holstein offered ideal conditions for a continuation of the East Prussian warmblood breed on a large scale. The junior master of the home, Donatus von Hessen, gives us an example of multidiscipline training. He's an up-and-coming talent in combined training events. From the hills and lakes near the Baltic Sea to the high plateaus of the Schwäbische Alb, to Marbach, the oldest stud farm on German soil and situated at an elevation of 700 meters, the highest, which celebrated its 400th anniversary in 1973. Here too, Trakehner blood has created a new type of horse. Prior to the Second World War, the Württemberg warmblood breeder's goal was the production of a strong, hardy and calm farm horse which was able to live on the poor soil and in the harsh climate of the Alp. And so they bred the strong-boned Württemberger, a willing workhorse. After the war, Marbach also attempted to breed a modern riding horse. Success came with the stallion Julmond, foaled in East Prussia in 1938, who's commemorated here. Julmond became the foundation sire of the Baden-Württemberg riding horse breed. In his 5 years at stud, the stallion produced 140 progeny. 22 of his sons were approved, 20 of his daughters were included in the herd of foundation mares. His successors as chief stallion, including the successful grey Pregel, were purebred East Prussians. Now the refinement period at Marbach is completed. The result? Sport horses with good jumping aptitude. An assurance for the future of this peacefully grazing herd of Trakehner mares. Three valuable Trakehner breeding stallions in front of the mare fountain. All horses foaled at the Marbach main stud are branded with an M and the deer antler on the right-hand quarter. The double moose antler on the left hip identifies the horse of Trakehner origin. An expressive head and a noble curve to the neck, distinct withers and good saddle position. Those are the typical characteristics of the noble East Prussian warmblood, with which the Baden-Württemberg breed has been developed to embody the modern riding horse type. Main River Plain near Aschaffenburg. Here the Hirstein stud has developed into an exemplary breeding facility, not least as a result of the work of stud director Dirk Jörs. Things are different here from the state-owned stud on the Schwäbische Alb. Here, the dedicated private citizen Adam Dressler took the risk of giving a new home to the homeless Trakehners without being subsidized by the taxpayer. The reason for Hirstein's good name today is the fact that only top stallions were used. And so the group of lively yearlings here is a logical consequence of the far-sighted breeder's initiative. This is where the valuable progenitors are at home. The stallion Habicht, a champion three-day event horse before he took up permanent residence at Hirstein. In the box next to him, the Trakehner Amadeus. And last but not least, Swazi, a thoroughbred used to refine and freshen Trakehner bloodlines. Why the one-time eventing star Habicht is so popular as a breeding stallion becomes clear when you look at his elegant yet powerful way of going. At the teasing wall, the now 18-year-old Habicht behaves like an impatient young lover. And in the breeding shed, he delivers what he promises. With a fertility rate of 80% from covering about 100 mares per season, the senior Trakehner is a top producer here as well. Although the advantages of artificial insemination have been discussed eagerly, the success rate is greater for natural covers than for artificial insemination. The transfer of fresh semen would be less problematic, but is still difficult due to institutional controls and red tape. The best advertisement for a breeding farm is, and will always be, its well-known and liked stallions, which demand and get stud fees up to 1,000 German marks. Constant training under saddle increases performance capability, and thus these movements from the M-level dressage test are no hobby for the stud director. They're part of the hard daily work of a well-run breeding farm. The tasks of a stallion testing station are somewhat different. Klosterhof Medingen in the Lüneburger Heide is a training station for the elite, open only to 3-year-old approved stallions. Here, the raw diamonds receive their final polish, and sometimes it turns out, to the sorrow of many a stallion owner, that his hopeful raw diamond is not, in fact, without flaws. After a free jumping session, they're backed for the first time and broken. This is done with a great deal of sensitivity, even more patience, and a lot of pedagogic tricks. Quite different from the way it was done in strictly Prussian Trakehnen. No rough pulling on the reins, no whip, no harsh word. The sensitive Trakehners appreciate this. In front of the medieval background of the Klosterhof, the first ride out together. After 100 days of training, the chaff is separated from the wheat. If the student flunks, the dream of owning a valuable breeding stallion is over. The horses are classified into 3 quality groups. They're evaluated according to character and temperament, willingness to perform and general performance capability, jumping aptitude in a free jump and under the rider, general rideability, and the basic paces of walk, trot and canter. A timed hunting gallop and a cross-country test round off the performance test program. Every one of the 100 days brings new, unaccustomed tasks, like going down a steep slide. The young stallions must learn to handle new situations. Once it's a wooden bridge over a noisy creek, then the unknown thunder of an express train. In a group, it's easier to get used to such traffic. The countryside is not without its problems, particularly if man helps it along and fills a harmless ditch that had previously been crossed without difficulty with a lot of water. The horse and the unknown element, a chapter in itself. Here again, the suspicious, timid herd waits for a somewhat more courageous leader. It takes time before the harmless puddle loses its terror. On it goes, lesson for lesson, until the most difficult obstacles are taken. Founder and master of this privately owned testing station is the dedicated Trakehner breeder Eugen Wahler.
For 50 years I've been wrestling with the question, if a horse is difficult, is it character or temperament? Character is difficult to correct. Temperament is easier to correct. It's up to the rider. If the character must be corrected, we need a strong rider, while for a correction of temperament, a sensitive rider will more likely be successful. This stallion is a bit playful, but this is typical stallion behavior. Although there's a herd of mares in the background, you can say that his character and temperament are okay, and that's the advantage of our Trakehner horses.
Every year in the spring, the elite Trakehner show and auction at the Reiterhof Kranichstein near Darmstadt takes place. Young riding horses of various qualities, which have been given their final polish at the Klosterhof Medingen, are offered for sale. The collection also includes 2-year-old mares. Breeders have to sell their horses to make a living. Buyers are riding enthusiasts from Germany and beyond. The auction horses demonstrate their talents in hand, free jumping and under the rider. As far as prices obtained for German riding horses are concerned, Trakehners are in the upper third of the scale, primarily because only top horses are offered for sale, and they're expensive to raise. Number 18 is being introduced. The auction catalogue describes the 4-year-old chestnut mare as a striking example with big lines, a productive walk, elastic trot and ground-covering canter. A dressage horse with a future? Interested buyers will have to decide that for themselves. Whether the dark bay with the beautiful name Elegance will turn out to be a charming top-class dressage queen as the catalogue promises, well, her future owner will have to wait and see. Obviously, she is talented. Most of the spectators on the bleachers are amateur riders with some knowledge of horses, and some of them have the necessary capital. In the programme of every large sales event, there's the evening gala show with games, sport, music and some pony fun. In some of the show numbers, the horses to be auctioned the next day are presented. And thus, the popular Prussian quadrille is, in fact, a sort of costumed promotion for the auction. The East Prussian warmblood has again achieved international stature. More and more breeding and sport horses are being sold to countries outside Germany, mainly to North America. 553 meters tall, the world's highest television tower stands in Toronto, Canada. Here, a successful farmer from East Prussia has managed to fulfill the dreams of his youth. On his farm on the edge of the city, he not only fattens cattle, he also breeds Trakehners. Here, on a farm on the northern outskirts of Toronto, I've come to talk to Gerhard Schickedanz, a farmer's son from the Tilsit area, from the region along the Memel. He came to Canada in 1952, made good here as a contractor and farmer, and is president of the American Trakehner Association. And between us, a famous mare. Mr. Schickedanz, can you tell us something about her?
As you said, she's famous. I bought her in 1970 in Birkhausen. Dr. Schilke was the president then, and he didn't want to part with her at all, but I was insistent. So I got her. She was in foal to the stallion Donauwind and came over here in September 1970, and in December she foaled a stud colt whom we named Abdullah.
Ein Hengstfohlen zur Welt gebracht, das wir Abdullah tauften.
And you know the Abdullah story.
But you still haven't told us the name of the mare.
The mare is called Abitsa. She's by Maharaja out of the mare Abendrot.
And now, Konrad Homfeld.
My relationship with Abdullah is a little over a year now, and if I were to have to judge all Trakehners by this one, I'd have to say that as a group they were pretty good. Abdullah has a natural talent for this particular sport. He is a good athlete, he's smart, and sensitive to the point that at one point it was a problem. He had a stopping problem because of his sensitivity. But I think now we have a a good friendship that's based on trust and not on fear, and I think that maybe accounts for our recent successes. Anyway, I've been privileged to ride him, and hope I can continue.
It was fortunate for horse and rider that the then 13-year-old grey Trakehner stallion was entrusted to a sensitive rider like Konrad Homfeld for preparation for the Los Angeles Olympics. Team gold for the United States and individual silver was the unexpected reward. In the meantime, audiences on showgrounds all over the world look forward to seeing Konrad Homfeld riding Abdullah. Whether they have a clear round or not, their style is a feast for the eyes, an aesthetic pleasure. The perfect harmony between rider and horse finds admiration and applause wherever they enter the ring. Abdullah's success has made American sports enthusiasts take notice and made the Trakehner horse famous almost overnight. When you visit the grey stallion in his stable on Sue and Terry Williams' farm, you'll find another attraction in the immediate vicinity, the Niagara Falls. A visit is well worthwhile. The gigantic display of nature attracts not only tourists. The undisturbed countryside all around offers ideal conditions for raising horses. The dedicated breeder Günther Bertelmann, born and brought up in Danzig, has created a Trakehner paradise on the Canadian side of the Niagara Falls. The pride and economic base of every breeder are his stallions. To see them presented is a special distinction for the visitor. More impressive than any advertising brochure is the live appearance of such an impetuous, lively herd of Trakehners. Günther Bertelmann has done much to further the Trakehner breed in the United States and Canada. More and more horse enthusiasts are turning to jumping, dressage and combined training. Harold Bixby is one of them, an American who has started to saddle and breed Trakehners, actively supported by the German Breed Association. And what better advice can Harold Bixby ask for than that from Dietrich von Lenski? The Star-Spangled Banner and the Trakehner flag, a hopeful sign for the advance of the East Prussian warmblood in horse-crazy America. Success in jumping and combined training have caused many breeders to switch from racing and the traditional breeding of thoroughbreds to breeding combined training horses. Privately owned courses are springing up everywhere like mushrooms. One of the successful businessmen who has started breeding Trakehners as a hobby is Henry Snyder.
Our family has been showing horses for a good number of years. We have been in thoroughbreds for the last 10 or 15 and have found that the warm bloods that have been brought over from Europe, of these we like Trakehners. The reason we do is strictly because of the bone they have, the additional muscling, and also the disposition.
A day's trip south of the US-Canadian border, the William Penn Monument, namesake of the state of Pennsylvania, towers over its capital city, Philadelphia. The law here stipulates that skyscrapers are not allowed to be built higher than the Penn Monument. The limit is 540 feet, 180 meters. Thus, the view into the hazy distance of the Atlantic isn't obscured. In the hilly garden countryside of Pennsylvania, there's another equestrian centre, Wonderland Farm. No other name would have been appropriate for the Trakehner farm owned by orthodontist Dr. David Goodman. A European used to narrow pastures and fields surrounded by fences truly encounters a wonderland here. The calling card of Wonderland Farm is their 3 Trakehner stallions. First, there is Donau Schimmer. Then the stallion Caesar. And finally, Zauberklang, or Zoberklang as the Americans say. We'll talk about him later. Dr. David Goodman financed his medical studies by trick riding and by leasing ponies. The leasing of riding horses has remained a profitable second line of business. The soul of the Wonderland operation is his wife Patricia, who, by the way, is an attractive and successful dressage rider.
When we started breeding Trakehners approximately 12 years ago, we had a tremendous number of non-selective people who brought us horses because it really was the fashionable or the in thing to do. But what I've noticed over the last 4 or 5 years is that people have become much more selective and much more sophisticated about their breeding, and they seem to be breeding for a purpose now, either for dressage or for eventing or even for open jumping. I would think you could summarize by saying that with the winning of the World Cup, where the Trakehners did so well, people have now realized that the Trakehner is now on the competition scene to stay and will be breeding more and more sophisticatedly.
Here in America, perhaps due to their belief in progress, artificial insemination with fresh semen is preferred to natural cover. The stallion is brought to a phantom and the semen collected in a plastic bag. A vet injects the semen, which is only a few minutes old. This is a regular procedure on Wonderland Farm and other places in the United States which are not encumbered with any red tape. A probe is used a few weeks later to check the success of the breeding and the size of the embryo. Good news, Zauberklang is going to be a father.
17-day Zauberklang, 14 millimeters.
Dressage at Devon, the mecca of dressage enthusiasts in the eastern states of the North American continent. Here, once a year in the summer, in the ancient-looking wooden arena, which reminds one of a Wild West film set, everyone who is anyone and of certain social standing get together, along with those who want to make a name for themselves. Wonderland Farm is represented. Pat Goodman shows her stallion Zauberklang. Dr. Wilfried Haring from Warendorf is the judge, with the incorruptible eye of the expert, a compliment to the German National Federation. Dr. Haring is here to give an expert, fair and neutral evaluation. A great deal of money is involved in this rendezvous of breeding stock. Winning a championship at Devon means an increase in the value of the horse, and for breeding stallions, higher stud fees.
And we now have the winner of the Stallion Championship. This is number 297. This is Zauberklang, a Trakehner stallion owned by Wonderland Farm.
You get goodies, you get...
Pat, it's your day today, your day and the day of Zauberklang. Are you happy today?
I'm afraid I am, yes. This is certainly a very wonderful day for the Trakehner breed and for Wonderland Farms.
I really think it does show the extent of interest in dressage in this country.
Presentation of the champions of Devon.
How much it is growing.
Although the Americans have not yet reached the European standards, It's only a question of time before the king of dressage riders, Dr. Rainer Klimke, will be facing competition from across the Atlantic. Dr. Klimke, many times world champion and Olympic gold medal winner, on his training grounds in Münster, is busy preparing two promising Trakehners for the difficult movements of upper-level dressage. First, the Beymare Strick, ridden by one of Dr. Klimke's assistants, showing what she's learned. How does the master himself evaluate the capabilities of the Trakehner?
The Trakehner is particularly well suited for dressage training. He's not only beautiful, but learns easily and is extremely sensitive. Characteristics that we need for a dressage horse. A dressage horse must distinguish itself by performing its movements independently, voluntarily, and with as much presence and brilliance as possible. Trakehners are ideal for this. Let's see how a young Trakehner, here the 6-year-old Paros, warms up for his dressage lessons.
Bevor dann für die einzelnen Dressurlektionen vorbereitet ist.
Patiently, gently, masterfully, away from the gaze of the public, the king of dressage riders prepares his horses, day in, day out, month after month, year by year. It's a task that requires a great deal of energy and perseverance. No one knows the number of active riders whose love and involvement is dedicated to the Trakehner horse. There may be thousands. This film can only mention a few. For example, Heinrich Baron von Senden, a member of the Hanover State Orchestra, who finances horses and vehicles out of his own pocket to help make driving popular. In this discipline, the Trakehners have proved to be what they used to be in East Prussia, willing and strong carriage and driving horses. Shortly before his untimely death, the executive director of the Trakehner Verband, Dr. Eberhard von Felsen-Serbeck, talked to us about the breeding goals.
The Trakehner breed differs basically from all other German riding horse breeds because it follows the principle of pure breeding. This is done primarily because we want to preserve and perpetuate the special features of this breed. This includes, first of all, their nobility, expressiveness, and special way of going, as well as their beauty.
Der besondere, Bewegungsmechanismus der Pferde und die Schönheit.
These are qualities that other riding horse breeds have as well, but they got them again and again from the Trakehner breed.
Immer wieder in ihre Zucht hineinholen.
The main event and gathering place for friends of the Trakehner horse from all over the world is the annual stallion approval, or Körung, in the Holstenhalle in Neumünster. The horses permitted to enter the ring here have been selected from among many of the same age. The crème de la crème of the 2-year-olds, less than 100 in number, are presented to the 5-member approval commission. Suitable for breeding or not approved, not selected. The horse's future life is decided here.
In the ring, stallion number 76, Itaxerxes. Measurements 164, 192, 20.5.
His measurements, height at the withers, heart girth and cannon bone, accompany the entrance of every new candidate. The names of the favourites are exchanged surreptitiously. The chestnut, Itaxerxes, is sure to be among them in spite of his white spots. Of the 80 stallions presented this year in Neumünster, more than half are bays. The others include 12 blacks, 8 greys and 11 chestnuts. The seal of approval, the neck brand, is given only to about a quarter of the 2-year-olds presented. This strict selection serves to increase the quality of the Trakehner breed. The die has been cast. The 5 best of this year have been chosen. Will the black Königstein be the champion? Will Itaxerxes win the race for first place? Does number 64, the grey Eichendorff, have a chance? Will the bay Samurai make it, or the grey Schönfeld? A tense time for their owners. Breeding honours and a lot of money are involved.
Number 76, the chestnut stallion Itaxerxes, by Tenner, a son of Tümmler, Dam by Cardinal, a thoroughbred out of an impulse mare. Ladies and gentlemen, this horse was bred, raised and is owned by Mr. Fritz Henning Behrer of the Webelsgrund stud. There's little that needs to be said about this stallion. Hardly anyone doubted that he would be the champion today.
The next day, champion Itaxerxes is the auctioneer's trump card.
Und 140 für den Grünwaldhof. Und 150 und 160 und zweiten und zum
Hammer falls and Itaxerxes changes owners for 170,000 marks. Not a bad price and certainly somewhat unusual. Will the approval commission be proven correct? The stallion must still complete his stallion performance test, the last seal of quality to show that he's suitable for breeding. On Saturday night, there's the gala show. As a solemn start, the flags of the guests from the United States and Canada, preceded by the traditional flag of the Regional Association of Country Riding Clubs of East Prussia. After the processional march, the show can begin.
This evening we've come full circle. Habicht is back in the ring. We've heard the East Prussian anthem, and now we wish you a safe journey home. Goodbye, and don't forget the Trakehner.
A request, or maybe more of a plea, and an East Prussian legacy. Don't forget the Trakehner.